Now the next tool to look at is the cylinder solid tool. But before I do that, I just want to show you one extra thing which you may have come across. I'm going to start the line tool instead. And I go to data point of the screen. As I drag my line around, the line of course should keep up with the compass. But you might see this happening. At this point the line does not keep up on connect with the cursor. It does down here just fine, but I get here and it stops. This is caused by an incorrectly set display depth. So I need to change that. So I'm going to Tile, and I need to set the display depth in the isometric view. So here's the display depth tool. I want to set it in the isometric, so I select the isometric view. And I'm going to use the front view here to set the display depth. And here we see the physical display depth right now. I need to set the front and back clipping planes. Now I'm going to zoom way out here and set my first clipping plane, which will be the front clipping plane, way over here, data point. And we see the display depth now much larger. And now I set the back clipping plane, which will be down here somewhere. Let's just see where that is. There it is. So now I have a very large display depth, which is exactly what I want. If you do this and you see just this small rectangle on the screen instead of the full display, then you've set the clipping planes backwards. You've set the back and the front in opposition to themselves, and all you're left with is just the active depth. So just reverse things and change your data points for the front and back clipping planes. Okay, let's get out of that. Let's go back to the full isometric view. And now when I start my line tool again, I should be able to see the line being drawn correctly. Yeah. Okay, let's get back to the main tool, which is cylinder solid. And the tool settings window is pretty simple. Standard orientations for the cylinders, stick to points. Orthogonal should be on. And under these conditions, all you have to do is enter the center point, drag the radius, and drag the cylinder. Very simple. If I start again but change the axis, change to a front view, drag the radius, and drag the height of the cylinder. All very simple, all very straightforward. But keep in mind that these two cylinders have been drawn in the plane of AccuDraw's compass, which may be fine, but you're limited, of course, to the 4 standard compass orientations. You can't draw, for example, from point to point at this moment out of the compass plane. If you try and do that, odd things happen. For example, let me draw a line. I'm doing this vertically downwards. I'm going to switch to top view. Draw in this direction. Now, right now I'm drawing in the plane of the compass. So if I use the top of that line and the right end of the horizontal line as my data points to place a cylinder, then I would still be in the plane of the compass when I did it. So I can take my line a little bit off the plane and off the axis and data point there. So now if I drew a cylinder from here to here, then things will be quite difficult. If I tried it with ortho on, we'd have a real problem because I have to now set the radius in the standard compass orientation. So there's the top view. That really is not going to work. There's my front view, which might work. The side view doesn't work. Let's get back to the front. Let's try the front. Let's define and try and drag up to this point. Can't do it. MicroStation won't let me snap to that point because it's off the compass plane. So we can't do that. So what I need to do is this. I need to set up an auxiliary coordinate just for those 2 data points. And I will do this before I start using the cylinder tool because it's much easier doing it before trying to place a cylinder than during placing the cylinder. So right now then, the first thing to do is to place the auxiliary coordinate. And I'm going to do that with the RA shortcut, as always. So RA at the keyboard. And watch the prompts. Define the x-axis origin. I'm going to start that there. So there's my origin. Now it wants to define the x-axis, which will be to that point, data point. And it wants the y-axis, which will be at right angles to the x. So I simply lock it to the compass axis and data point. So now I'm going to place the actual cylinder. And I'm going to leave orthogonal on because I want the end caps of the cylinder to be square with the cylinder, but I'm going to set a radius. and I'll use that 250. I could reset that if I wanted to, but I'll use 250. Now I need to place a center point. It's asking me for that, so our data point there. And this is where I can rotate the compass. Now, I need to know which is the best orientation in my auxiliary rotation. So I press E at the keyboard. That's clearly going the wrong direction, so let's go to this one, which is clearly the right one. So having done that, snap to my top point, and we're done. Let's try a rotation. And yes, it's perfect. I have square ends. My cylinder goes from point to point, which is off the standard orientation as it should be. This is particularly so if you compare my diagonal cylinder with the two previous cylinders which were on the axes. So everything's fine. So that might seem a little complex, having to put an auxiliary coordinate just for that one cylinder, but that's by far the best way of doing it if you need to go from point to point off the standard compass orientations. So please practice those. Try a cylinder like I did off the standard orientations, because that's an important operation.